former president, Donald Trump, would-be future president as well. He's in the news for two different reasons. One, he is suing CNN, the broadcaster, claiming defamation and libel. He's claiming the network carried out a campaign of libel and slander against him, accusing him of being a racist and indeed comparing him with Hitler. He's claiming $475 million in damages. That will certainly help to pay some of Donald Trump's legal fees as he faces various civil suits and possible criminal suits himself. This as a new book about Donald Trump called Confidence Man, written by New York Times journalist Maggie Haberman, was released this morning and has explosive new details, including how he had planned to fire his daughter and son-in-law by Twitter. And also that he routinely flushed documents down the toilet. Well, let's talk about all of this now with Scott Lucas, Professor of Politics, International Politics at University College at Dublin. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Good morning. Extraordinary revelations. Can we just talk first of all about the suing of CNN? There's no doubt at all, CNN and Donald Trump, there is no love lost, but Donald Trump has a history of bringing lawsuits, doesn't he? There was a time before he became a politician when, frankly, he had about 100 going at any one time.
Yeah. Here's my reaction this morning, Julia. Meh. Donald Trump, as you know, does this quite often when he wants to, well, one, get attention to himself, which he quite often likes to do. And in this case, he wants to get attention to himself because he's very worried about the political challenge of the Republican Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida. And two, when Donald Trump wants to divert from other news stories, for example, the latest story today that he, according to his lawyer, misled the legal team about the classified documents that he had at Mar-a-Lago in Florida before the FBI seized them.
Right. So yes, it's another case of don't look over there. Just look somewhere else. But let's talk about this new book as well. Interesting. He wanted to fire Ivanka Trump and her husband Jared Kushner, very senior figure in the White House. He basically was in charge of pretty much of every policy, wasn't he, at one point? And he was planning to do so by Twitter, which is quite extraordinary.
Well, Donald Trump's use of Twitter is extraordinary in many ways, at least when he can still tweet. But in this case, I think with respect to Maggie Haberman, she's a good journalist, but it's a flutter. Donald Trump threatened to fire everyone in the White House at some point. The fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, Ivanka Trump, his daughter, and Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, were there for all 4 years. Jared Kushner was there despite the fact that he could not get a security clearance because of issues with his contacts with foreign governments. And Ivanka Trump was there for 4 years despite the issue of nepotism. So it makes for a good headline, but I think the bigger story is that they stayed loyal to Trump till the end, and Trump stayed loyal to them and will continue to do so. Yeah, indeed. But it's into also some of the other revelations, the idea that the claim that he flushed documents down the toilet. That revelation I think we've heard before. Also asking his lawyer, the former New York City Mayor, Rudy Giuliani, to, quote, do anything to overturn the 2020 election. As we saw, doing anything involved quite a lot. Also that he thought staff members in the White House who were from ethnic minorities, he genuinely thought that they were waiters. Yes, and this brings us back around to Trump's frivolous, and let's call it what it is, lawsuit down in Florida. Yeah. When he says that people accused him of being a racist, well, Donald, what have you said on the record about people of color and about minorities? Yeah. When you say that people called you an insurrectionist, can you put on the record for us the connections that you had with those people who stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021? And when you say, well, people compared me to Hitler, well, can you give us an account of what respect you had, if any, for America's institutions and systems? Or rather, in fact, did you try to tear them down while you were president? Yeah, it's going to be fascinating the next year or two. We've got the midterms coming up only next month in America, and the big test is going to be how many of the candidates who Trump is backing and who've sworn allegiance to Donald Trump and signed up to his idea that he is actually the legitimate president of the United States and not Joe Biden. How well those candidates do, that will be a big factor in what happens in the next year or so. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got the overarching story, which is, will the Democrats or Republicans have control of Congress? And at this point, I think it's split. Democrats will have the Senate, Republicans will have the House. But for Republicans, when you've got effectively this civil war within the party, how strong are the Trumpists? If the Trumpists are very strong, that poses problems for the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. if the Trumpists don't do so well, the establishment begins to regain ground, and that means regaining ground against Trump's run in 2024.
Let's talk first of all about Donald Trump suing CNN. The guest we had on earlier, rather less sympathetic than you are to Donald Trump, points out that when he sues CNN for claiming defamation and libel, seeking $475 million in damages, claiming the network carried out a campaign of libel and slander against him, calling him racist, comparing him with Hitler in terms of taking down you know, the sort of, I suppose, the checks and balances in public life. Is this a serious court case, or is this him trying to divert attention from all the other things he's in the news for in terms of court cases?
Yeah, tough question, Julia, because you never really know with President Trump whether he's just trying to get attention and make a splash. And, you know, he's known as someone who fights back. And I think most politicians, both on the right, left and right, would sort of understand that some networks more than others are going to have a bias, you know, for or against that politician. Yeah. So it's just not in his nature to roll over. So I'm not necessarily defending it. I don't think there's probably a lot of merit to it. And it just depends on, you know, what kind of judge sees the case. I mean, you know, we just lost a great one in Lawrence Silberman, who was really well known for judicial restraint. And yet he was actually for overturning the New York Times versus Sullivan, which was the great libel case that protected the New York Times. So I guess there is a limit. So, you know, look, you know, whether the case has merit, that's for a conversation with the Lawrence Silbermans of the world, not with me. But I do understand that the president likes to punch back, and so if this is his way of doing it, you know, no surprise there, really.
I mean, there's no love lost between CNN and Donald Trump, no doubt at all. And again, as a news network, it's amazing how much of their coverage... I'm employed to give my opinion. You know, they're supposed to be getting news coverage, and it certainly has been very biased. And that's a big issue, I think, in American media right now. But let's talk about this book. New book by New York Times journalist Maggie Haberman. Her book is called Confidence Man. And some of the revelations of this, following him from his time as a businessman to his life after presidency, she's talking about how he used to flush documents down the toilet when he was in the White House. She asked former American New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani to do anything to overturn the 2020 election, and also planned at one point to fire his daughter Ivanka and Jared Kushner, her husband, by Twitter, but then eventually did not do so. These are not the normal behaviours of the Commander-in-Chief and the President of the United States.
No, absolutely. And you know, President Trump was not one really well known for following traditional norms, to say the least. I mean, I don't think there's any surprise there. But I'm always careful with these tell-all books, you know, even before President Trump. You know, they're often just that, you know, tell-alls trying to get attention. And I always try to make to clarify during his administration, you know, what the difference between what the president did, what the president said, and more importantly, what the press said he said. And I think in this case, it looks a lot like the famous Atlantic article that came out back in 2019, which was, you know, essentially untrue, or at least completely unproven. So I haven't read the book, but look, I think that you're always seeing these kind of things. Most often it turns out he didn't say those things, or he didn't do those things, and that's why I never get too excited about it.
OK. Well, there was also an interesting point about him apparently being scared of when he had COVID back in October 2020, and his condition at the White House did worsen, and he was fearful of dying. This is a man who massively played down COVID as a threat.
Yeah, I mean, look, those were, it seems like 100 years ago, but...
Doesn't
you know,
it just,
Yeah, when he got, you know, COVID, I mean, look, he obviously was very against the lockdowns, you know, after the initial one. And it really became politicized. So I think, you know, he was probably one to, you know, to sort of brag about, you know, I can take this, or I can lick this. You know, who knows what how he really felt personally. And as far as, you know, turnover in the White House or the administration, you know, with Ivanka, Jared, you know, nothing would surprise me, but I'm very cautious about hearing from the people, especially someone from the New York Times, you know, claiming he said something that's hearsay. I'm just really cautious about that.